My name's Alex McGregor, and in this video, we're going to learn how to set up your Nomad star tracker. So this beautiful little star tracker is the next generation of tracker made by the company Shoot Move. It's super compact, lightweight, but even though it is so small, it has some features that make it even better at star tracking than the original Shoot Move. So in this video, we're gonna go over all those features, see how to set it up for taking your photos of the night sky. I am going to interrupt myself real quick and say that this video you're watching is a bit long. It's gonna be about 25 to 30 minutes, and I go super in depth into every aspect that you'll need to know to use the Nomad and your camera to photograph the stars. If you don't need the full details, click on this video right here. It'll take you to a 2.5 minute version of the same video, or you can just watch this one at 2x speed. So the first thing you're gonna wanna do is charge it. Included is a USB-C cable. You plug that into this port on the side. As soon as this indicator light turns from orange to green, you know you have a full charge and we're good to go. Another really nice thing about the Nomad is that it can be ran off of a battery pack. So this one I have can take a USB-C or a regular USB, and you can plug that right into the Nomad. It can actually track while it's being charged. Now let's take a moment to examine the different features of this tracker. So right above the little charging port, you can see this switch, and this is the only switch on the device, which makes it super simple. There's really small letters N and S. Those stand for north and south. So whichever hemisphere you're shooting from, you want to set your switch accordingly when you turn it on. On the back here, we see this little red screw. This screw is covering the port that you're going to use to attach your laser. So you can spin this off and see that there's a hole going all the way through the tracker, and this is what you're gonna send your laser through when you're aligning to Polaris. On the bottom, we have an Arca Swiss plate, and this is built in, which is really nice because you never have to worry about it becoming loose, and the dovetail cutouts go in both directions. So if you want to set it up like this, that's fine. If you want to set it up 90 degrees to that works as well. So another really nice innovation. Now, one of the biggest improvements over the Shoot Move is the system for attaching our camera. This system is awesome, and let me show you how it works. So you can spin off this threaded cover, which will release this plate that you can attach to your ball head. Now, when I first got my Nomad tracker, this plate felt like it was attached, like permanently. I knew this had to come apart. The red part comes off of the silver part, but it took a little bit of prying to actually get it apart. But once you do, you are all good. Now this is the part that you attach to your ball head. We can screw it in, and there's a little set screw to make sure things are really secure. I'll show you how to use all of that when we get to that part. All of the gear that I'm showing in this video is available in links down below, and if you do buy anything through shootmove.com, please be sure to use the discount code ALEX at checkout. Now we're gonna show you how to attach your Nomad to your tripod. I love using the Venmo 3-way geared head. I love how these micro adjustments make really fine changes to the alignment. You can also pick up something like this. This is the wedge from Shoot Move. Again, it has gears, so it makes really nice little adjustments, or a simple ball head sitting on top of your tripod will do just fine. So when using the Venmo 3-way geared head, you notice it'll tip more in one direction than the other. So I like setting it with the ball head side facing towards the handle side on the top of the geared head. Now for setting up your laser to attach to your Nomad tracker. The laser you get is a really nice adjustable laser. Sometimes in shipping it might get bounced around, so that beam of light might not be perfectly straight, but thankfully you're able to calibrate these lasers and the polar scope. So if you want a video on calibrating laser or scope, click right here. Now the first thing you want to do with the laser is take the back off that holds the battery. I've already done this, but there may be a little white paper right here, preventing the battery from working. So make sure that you take that out, because that has been a point of frustration when people think they have a faulty battery. This battery also is rechargeable, and with your kit, you'll get a little charger like this one, which plugs into a micro USB port, and you can charge up your battery, which is super convenient. Now on the side of the laser where the beam is going to be coming out, you can unscrew this front piece, and with your rotator in your little kit, you should receive this little adapter, which you can screw your laser into, and this will screw right into this port that was originally covered by this red cap. Turn it on. Now we can see the laser is working. This beam of light is going out into the night sky, and we can align our tracker. I love using the laser. It's the most convenient way of aligning. It's super fast, but if you want to get the most accuracy possible, let's set up our polar scope. Again, this scope is adjustable, and that video, this one right here again, shows you how you can calibrate it in case it's a little bit out of alignment. First thing, you want to remove the laser, and the bracket, the red part, needs to come out also. And then with your polar scope, you'll get this bracket. You can see it's just the right size for the polar scope to fit through. In here, you can see there's a little grooved kind of notch looking setup, and that is meant to fit the curve of the Nomad right on that top edge. So we can set this on there, and we can see these holes align really nicely. And the red attachment guy for your laser fits right in there, and you can screw it on. And then with your polar scope, you can slide it right into there and tighten this little white screw to make sure it's secure. Another thing that's really cool that'll come with your polar scope is this glow-in-the-dark illuminator. A lot of the other trackers will have like a red light or something like that to illuminate the reticle inside of the polar scope. I really like this because you can slide it onto the front of your polar scope. And then when you're out at night, you just hit this with a bit of light from your headlamp, and it will glow long enough for you to get a really nice polar alignment. Now, say we're not in the northern hemisphere and we can't just go off of Polaris. How are we going to align our star tracker? Move Shoot Move has this bracket which can hold your phone out at a 90-degree angle from the Nomad tracker. And I have a full video on the proper way of using this bracket with your cell phone right here. That is for the Move Shoot Move rotator. This is going to be used on the Nomad, but the principles still apply on how you want to set this up and set your phone on it. But the really cool part about this is this little device that attaches all three of these at once. So you can have your laser, your polar scope, and your phone adapter all working together to get you aligned. The first thing you're going to want to do is slide your phone adapter into the bracket and secure it with this little white screw. Then using the same red connector for the laser pointer, you're going to send that through this hole and attach it to the Nomad. And there's these little grooves on the side of the bracket that holds the phone adapter that can help you make sure that you're nice and square. So this will hold your phone, but still, if you want to use your polar scope, you still can. So this can be a nice system if you are in a country where you can't use the laser, but you still want to get a really accurate alignment. You can just use your phone to help you to find Polaris, and then use the polar scope to get it really fine-tuned in there. No matter what your situation is, you can still get really accurate alignments with this setup. Next, let's talk about how to attach your ball head. So for that, you're going to remove this red ring. So now that you have that plate off, you're going to want to grab your ball head and still have this rotational locking ring sitting onto the plate your ball head attaches to. And then you're going to screw it into the bottom of your ball head. And then once you got that nice and tight on there, you're going to want to get this attachment a little bit more than finger tight. So you can use something like a flathead screwdriver, a coin, but I like to use the Allen key that is shipped with the Nomad. It's meant to tighten the set screw, but you can also get it in there and get this a little bit tighter. Then once you do that, you can spin this set screw so it's a little bit even more secure onto your ball head. Now with this, you line up these teeth of this gear with the teeth on here, spin this locking ring to get everything into place. So that is the basic setup for how to get your ball head onto the Nomad. Now let's attach our camera. For tonight, I'm gonna be using the Canon RP with a 35mm lens. So we're going to want to orient this about where it will be pointed towards the North Star. We want to get our ball head into position where it will be about pointed towards the Milky Way or Orion, whatever we might be photographing that night. Lock the ball head into place and then slide our camera onto the ball head. All right, so now we have all of our items set up. We have our polar scope, our laser, our ball head, our camera is all good to go. Now if we're outside, we want to turn our laser on and align to the North Star. So I'll show you how to find the North Star in a moment, but there's one interesting little thing that we need to know first. So sometimes if we have our camera on, this laser, when we turn it on, will actually hit the bottom of the camera. So because of this, you're gonna wanna do your first alignment without the camera on, and then check your alignment after you've set the camera, because sometimes setting the camera can bump things around. So to do this, just loosen the rotating nut on your ball head, rotate the camera slightly out of the way. Now we can see the beam has room to pass through. Then after we make all of our adjustments, we'll turn our laser off and set our camera back into position. So now that we're all set up, how do we know where to point our laser at night? How do we get our tracker aligned to the rotation of the Earth? Interrupting myself again to say, if you like that hoodie or maybe this shirt, I am making these and there's links available down below where you can purchase them. Well, thankfully for us in the Northern Hemisphere, we have a really friendly helper called Polaris. It's the North Star, and it is really close to dead center on the celestial pole. So to find that, there's two constellations that we can look for. The first one is the Big Dipper. The Big Dipper is nice because it's massive in the sky and you can see it almost every single night of the year. So if we think about the Big Dipper, it looks like a handle with a bit of a spoon end to it. So if we take the last two stars that make up the spoon end and we point them in the same direction as of the handle, so if it's like the handle's up and we point these up, we can make an imaginary line, look out into the sky and find one star that seems to be sitting on its own. That should be Polaris. The other constellation we can use is Cassiopeia. It kind of looks like a crooked M or a crooked W, and Polaris will be situated almost exactly between Cassiopeia and the Big Dipper. So whichever one of these you can see throughout the night, you can use them to find the North Star. There's also some really helpful apps you can get on your phone that will show you exactly how to find the North Star, but I like to not have to rely on my phone. In case something goes wrong with that, I'd like to be able to orient myself and find it just using those constellations. Now that we found Polaris, we need to point our laser pointer and it'll send that beam out towards it, and we need to align that beam right on the North Star. Now I did say the North Star moves a little bit, but this is accurate enough for most all of our tracking situations. However, we can make our alignment really, really accurate by using the polar scope. So to do that, you need to get an app on your phone. I know I was just saying, I don't want to get an app on my phone or rely on it, but for the polar scope, it is very helpful. The app I use on my Android phone is called Polar Finder. And all this app does is shows where we need to position Polaris inside of the polar scope based on the time of year and also on the time of night. When we look through our polar scope, we'll see this little ring that goes in a circle with that tiny, tiny dot right in the middle of it. That tiny dot represents the true celestial pole, so the actual center of the axis the Earth is rotating on, and this outer ring represents the path that Polaris will take through the night. Now, depending on what time of night it is, Polaris will be at a different point on this outer ring. So we can use our app to see exactly where we need to position Polaris inside of our scope right on that ring. Now, when you're looking through your scope, everything will be inverted, but that's fine. Just still go with, if the app is saying Polaris should be at the 6 o'clock position, put it at the 6 o'clock position when you're looking through the polar scope. So doing this will make sure that your polar scope is aligned exactly to the celestial pole. And if you want a more detailed explanation on how to use a polar scope and how to align it, click on that video right there. Now we need to talk about what we're actually going to be photographing. How do we find the most beautiful parts of the night sky? Again, yes, there are apps for that, but if we just learn a little bit of simple astronomy, we can find the really cool parts of the night sky. For starters, we can just learn 2 constellations that will get us where we want to go. In the winter, we want to learn the Orion constellation. The Orion constellation is massive, beautiful, and really easy to recognize, and it's up in the northern hemisphere most of the winter. The other constellation we can learn is Scorpio. Scorpio looks like its namesake, a scorpion, and it has some of the most gorgeous things in the night sky in it. We can look at the star of Antares in the Rho-Ophiuchi cloud complex, and finding Scorpio will also find us the rest of the Milky Way. The Milky Way rises early in the morning, starting in February, but I don't really start trying to really photograph it until March, and it's visible through about October. So now that we're all ready to shoot, what do we actually do with our camera? Well, here's a couple quick tips we can run through. We want to make sure we double check battery and memory card. We want to make sure that we take off our camera strap. We also want to make sure that if our lens has image stabilization, turn that off. Now, it doesn't always affect things negatively, but sometimes when you're combining like a Canon camera with a Tamron lens, that image stabilization in the lens can cause some jittering in our images. So it's a good habit to just always turn that off. We want to make sure we are in manual focus and we're able to fine-tune our focus on the stars without it jumping into our autofocus system, because that just ruins everything. We also want to make sure we're shooting in RAW, because that will give us the best possible data that we can work with on our computer. Also, for triggering your camera, you want to either set up a 2-second delay, so you push the button, your camera waits 2 seconds, it takes the photo, or attach an intervalometer or a separate shutter release remote. Now let's talk a little about exposure math. I have a video about how to calculate the proper exposure time for stars in this video right here. It explains how to use the rule of 500 or 400 and the MPF rule to get the right shutter speed for your camera and lens. So using those equations for this full frame camera and 35mm lens, if we weren't using the star tracker at all, I would set this to a time of about 10 seconds. So for our math, I can write 10. And I'm going to use the maximum f-stop of f1.8. And I'm going to use my ISO of 6400. That'll get me a nice image of the stars, but we really want to use the most out of this tracker and push that time as much as possible. So when I double the time, it's doubling the amount of light that's reaching the sensor. So if I want to maintain that same exposure, if I double the time, I need to take light away from somewhere else. So let's say we go to 20 seconds. I'm going to leave my f-stop at 1.8. And I'm going to change my ISO to 3200. So that's 1 stop of added light on the time. We're going to remove 1 stop from the ISO. Now let's push our tracker a little harder and go to 40 seconds. Lowering the ISO can help create a nicer image as far as the noise, but lowering the f-stop can make a cleaner image as far as the sharpness and detail in the stars. So let's change our f-stop to 2.8. And then let's keep our ISO at 3200. All right, let's say we're doing good with our tracker. We want to double that again. We'll go to 80 seconds. We'll leave our f-stop at 2.8. And we'll lower our ISO to 1600. Now at this point, we're realizing that we have a lot of flexibility with how our exposure looks. So we're going to want to review our image on our camera, and don't just rely on the LCD screen, but make sure you're viewing your image through your histogram. Because like a pilot wants to fly by tools, not just by sight, we want to use our tools to make sure we're getting the most out of our camera. So when we're using our histogram, we want to bring the main peak of our exposure off that left side, because that will lose a lot of data in the blacks. We want to start moving our exposure more towards the center. So with our exposure of 80 seconds, f2.8 and 1600, we might be still fairly dark. So we can test that by just using our camera. So we may want to increase our exposure time to, let's say, 160 seconds, and then leave our f-stop at 2.8 and leave our ISO at 1600. But this is really where you need to review how your camera's performing, what the exposure is looking like. But this is just an idea of the math that we can do to make sure we're getting properly exposed images. Looks like we've done all the talking we can inside. So let's head out tonight, put this all to work, and really see how it goes. So if you made it this far in the video, obviously you're pretty invested in it. If you go ahead and use your Nomad and realize there's still a few quirks that you haven't been able to work out yet, I am offering one-on-one Zoom classes where we can sit down on the computer and we can work through any problems you might be having. I've had a lot of success, and I just got to work with a guy up in Canada a couple of weeks ago, and it was really fun. So hit those links if you're interested. Welcome to my favorite office. We're up here on Loveland Pass overlooking Arapahoe Basin Ski Resort. We have a beautiful view of the mountain, and Orion is sitting perfectly just above. I've already taken my foreground images because there was a little bit of clouds, but those clouds have moved on. The stars are out. Now let's get to tracking. So I have my Nomad tracker set up. I aligned with the laser to Polaris, which is just back that way, just like I showed you in the office. Attached it there, sent that beam through. A couple of tips when you are aligning with the laser, especially out there in the cold. The first one is keep it warm. It dies pretty quick when it's in those freezing temperatures. So I like to keep mine like even directly in my glove, and then I take it out, align with it, and put it back in case I have to realign later. And I shouldn't have to tell you this, but make sure that you're really careful that there's no airplanes flying through the sky when you're using your laser to align. I'm using the V bracket to give myself a little bit of an elevated surface to work off of. So it was really easy to rotate the camera out of position and rotate it back so that laser could pass through. So now I'm going to get my camera focused and take my first 30-second shot to make sure I like my composition. So I like my composition okay, but I want to pan up just a little bit because I want to get more Bernard's loop in the constellation. Taking one more 30-second photo, then we should be good to hook up our intervalometer, and that will take longer than 30-second photos. So we're going to switch our camera into bulb mode and test out shooting for 2 minutes, as long as this exposure or composition looks right. Yes, that is exactly the composition I'm looking for. So now it's time to increase. All right, we got 2 minutes, 0 star trailing. They look absolutely perfect. I'm gonna go for 4. You never realize how long 4 minutes is until you're standing out in the cold, waiting for it to be over. But we're almost there. All right, 4 minutes looks perfect. I love the way these stars look, and I love that I can lower my ISO down to 800. This is going great. So I'm gonna let my camera do its thing. I'm gonna set up the intervalometer to take 10 photos at 4 minutes so we can stack those, and I will see you guys next back in our nice warm office. Welcome back. We were definitely warmer now. Look, it's t-shirt weather in here. So we had a really good success out there. I took those 10 photos at 4 minutes and I didn't get any star trailing throughout the whole time. So the Nomad worked great and that laser alignment was accurate enough for 4 minutes at 35 millimeters. So here is the final result. There's a lot of that H alpha gas coming out of Bernard's loop because I have that Astro modified camera from Spencer's camera. Really nice lighting on the foreground, which I am kind of cheating because of all the snow, and also the lights from the ski resort are helping to light it up, but that's why it's one of my favorite spots to go. So that'll just about wrap it up for how we use our Nomad to track the stars. Please give me that thumbs up. If this is your first time watching my video, I come out with a lot of astrophotography and wildlife photography videos. Hit subscribe, hit the bell notification, and leave me a comment. I would really appreciate it. All right, thank you guys. I will see you on the next video.